Are gonna rock and roll. My name is Becky Todd. I'm the Director of Programs at the University of Arkansas. And to my, I guess, that side on my video is Kristen D'Angelo. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, Kristen D'Angelo, Director of Facilities here at the University of Arkansas. And we're excited to have you all today for our conversation in talking about what's going on in your life, the Associate Director Roundtable. We've got some topics pre-established, but we also would like to kind of get a feel for the room, just kind of who everybody is really quickly. So quick intro, who you are and what school you are at. And so we'll call you out since there is 19 of us in here. So just real quick, so we can start building our associate director community. We'll start with Mike because he's up this way for me.
Hi everyone, Mike Hoover. I'm Associate Director of Assessment, Staff Development and Outdoors at the University of Arkansas.
Thanks, Mike. Mary Ellen.
Mary Ellen Milam. I'm the Associate Director of Programs at TCU.
Thanks, Mary Ellen. Chris.
Chris Muller, UT Arlington, Associate Director.
Christy.
Good morning, everybody. Christy Caldwell, Associate Director at Texas State, the San Marcos campus.
Jaron.
Hey, good morning. Jared Jackson, Associate Director of Programs and Outreach, LSU.
Thanks, Jared. And then close, Jaron Ryder.
Thanks. Jaron Ryder, Associate Director for Programs and Assessment at Sam Houston State University.
Justin Cato.
Senior Associate Director for Texas A&M Commerce.
Perfect. Ben Piper.
Morning, Ben Piper. I'm the Associate Director of Programs at UT Dallas.
Wonderful. Gary.
Hello, Gary Armstrong, Associate Director, University of Oklahoma.
Thanks, Gary. Mac. We'll drop down to Connie.
Hello all, I am Director of Aquatics and Facilities and Programs at MICDS. I was at a university for 13 years, so just squatting in on your conversation.
Wonderful, happy to have you. Brad?
Hey, good morning everyone. Brad Wilson, Associate Director of Facility Operations, LSU.
Thanks, Brad. Randall?
Kristen and Becky, I did not get up on time. I am so dedicated to my Region 4 family that I am driving in my car. Glad to be a part of the conversation. I am the Associate Director of Development and Communications at UT Austin.
Great, thanks, Randall. Ben?
Ben wrote in the chat that he's at Stephen F. Austin. He's the Associate Director of Facilities and Membership Services.
Perfect, thanks for monitoring that chat, Becky.
Hey, this is Max Steiner. I'm Associate Director of UTD Facilities. Sorry, my microphone wasn't working, sorry.
No, you're all right. Thank you. Let's see, Todd?
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. Todd Robin. I am the Assistant Director at St. Louis University.
Great. James?
Good morning. I'm James Nash, Junior Associate Director of Facilities Aquatics, Texas A&M University.
John? I think we got John and then we have one other John. I think you just joined. We were just introducing ourselves and where we're at.
John Wander at Kansas State University.
Perfect. And then Clint just added in. Clint, if you want to introduce yourself and where you're at.
Clint Hafler, Kansas State University.
And then we got one more, Jerkowski, I believe that is. Oh, you're muted. There you go.
Jerkowski from University of Kansas, Associate Director of Programs.
Wonderful. Well, thanks everybody. I think I got everyone. If I didn't, Lauren, it looks like you just joined. Lauren, you want to introduce yourself and where you're at? Hey, Lauren, we were just introducing ourselves. If you want to introduce yourself and where you're at really quick.
Oh, sure. Yes. Sorry. I caught the end of that and I was like,
You're good.
okay, cool. Everyone else is introducing themselves. Lauren Easter. I'm at Missouri State University and I am the associate director.
Perfect. Well, welcome. Like, we are happy to have everyone here and a part of this conversation today. We've got some questions to start us off with today, just to kind of see where we're at, what we want to talk about, and really start to build not only our Region 4 network, but our associate director community. So I'm going to turn over to Becky, who's going to share her screen now to help y'all get into this quick mentee response document.
I know you all love a poll, so if you could open another browser and join me in just indulging in menti.com using the code 9092076. We're just trying to get a feel for like who's here, kind of what your responsibilities are, so that we can take this back at the end and compile it with some other information that Kristen and I have been collecting since early last year.
We'll also be monitoring the chat. So if anytime you need to drop something, feel free to drop it in the chat. Have any questions, you can do it to the group, or you can change it just to Becky or myself. Keep an eye on it. So the site is menti.com, menti.com, and then it'll ask for that code that Becky has up on the screen right now.
So we're slowly trickling in. Give it just another minute. For those of you that are just dying to participate in another poll online. We force our young people to do this all the time, so it's good practice for us. All right, so the first question is, what is your institutional enrollment?
And these first few questions we're going to ask is just kind of getting a snapshot of who's in the conversation today, where they're at, how long they've been there, school size. Maybe you can look for someone who's in similar size as you, same amount of time in the position, just to get that information and connection going.
All right, the next is, how long have you been an associate director? Awesome. So we're really spread out, but we've got a lot of seniority is kind of what it boils down to. And then how many people, how many full-time staff report directly to you? All right, and then what topics did you come here today wanting to talk about?
Leading multiple personalities, yes. We all resonate with that information. Hopefully this will be very informative. Motivation for staff members, new to the position, development. Leading during COVID without answers. I think we said at one point, what, Becky, the blind leading the blind? We were.
That's what it feels like sometimes.
These are some great answers. Full-time staff morale. What are we doing for programming? You have another associate. How do you split? Listening in. All great things. Staying engaged with students. You're not directly overseeing them. More COVID responses. These are great. We definitely have some topics to start to cover and talk about, and then getting these added in to make sure they're covered so that we can get and hopefully touch on everything y'all are looking for today. Advancement in career, that's awesome.
All right, well, we'll kind of move on from this. If you have other things, just drop them in the chat. But so we're here to, these were some of the topics that we had kind of preloaded. It seems like COVID and management are really hitting kind of the topics that you all are bringing to the table. So let's open the floor for whoever wants to ask the first question. If you want to start with kind of some of those leading staff management type of topics. If anyone wants to dive right in, otherwise Kristen and I can kind of preload and ask what you've got going on.
I think some of the things that came through there were some people were leading staff with multiple personalities or leading in the time of no answers. Anybody want to jump in with either of those or provide feedback?
Kristen, I'm assuming you mean that we're leading staff members who have different personalities as a
Thanks. The shortening of that did not work out well, did it?
Although sometimes I wonder.
Personalities. People may come out at times, but yes, thank you.
Well, I'll kind of hit on my experiences so far. Actually, I'm going to come back to you and close my door.
No worries.
Hey, tell Addie she's kicked out for a little bit.
So does anybody have any experiences like currently that they feel like maybe they could offer advice to others about how they've been trying to keep morale up within their direct reports or within their department? I know particularly at our university, those sport club and intramural folks are struggling the most because their programming has been very limited. Has anybody had any success or anything they've, tried as points of encouragement that they could provide to others?
I think for me, Becky, it was a matter because we are programming, but I personally oversee the sport club program. So there's a little bit of a dichotomy of being an associate director of programs, but having a program area that I have to work through. But then I also have fitness and then intramural sports. And I think in that role, in the role of associate director, my position has been to be the advocate for how can we do this and do this well, because the hunger is there to want a program and almost aggressively like, I need to do this, so help me figure out how to do it well. And so kind of being that liaison to say, we can do this, we just have to figure out what we can do that fits it within guidelines, and then maybe be that advocate to kind of push some of those university guidelines, since we're seeing other events or departments like athletics or other people that are able to do programming. So being that advocate so that at least it isn't just one person trying to program and figure out how to do that, that's kind of been where my role has been during COVID.
I would piggyback off of Mary Ellen's experience. So we are also programming. We have intramurals happening with full team sports right now, and that's something that a lot of people are not doing. I currently oversee that because that was the position I held before I got promoted to associate. So keeping myself motivated. But I think that my biggest struggle right now as associate director is keeping my outdoor adventure assistant director motivated, because they have 0 trips happening right now because we can't get people to a van to travel. And so challenging him on what to do as far as what can we do through social media, what can we do where we have people meet up outside, because outdoor activities are still, you know, super pro, but we are having those limitations with barriers of getting people to those places. We've had one trip scheduled where we had everybody meet at the river and everybody got in a kayak, and we had 30 people come out to that at different waves. So that was successful. But thinking about what do we do for those trip leaders for next year that are, you know, they've had no work, they've had no training. How do we continue to stay engaged with those student leaders, as well as our skills for planning and programming trips? So that's been my most difficult one, since we were able to we were pressured into doing intramurals, so we made it happen. So that was great. And then our club sports are, you know, they're weird just in general. They're very difficult to navigate.
Thanks for sharing, Lauren and Mary Ellen. I think y'all had some really great points in there that hopefully, even though we're all in different stages of programming and have different politics on our campus, how we can come to the table and look at it, you know, is kind of similar between our different groups, and making sure that there's support, but challenging the staff in this environment is important.
Hey, I was going to say one thing I found with sport programs as a whole is, you know, a lot of times, and I came up through sport programs, so I know this was me as well, but we would always complain that we never had enough time for staff because we were having to do so much pivoting to scheduling of sports. And so right now for us, the only team sport that we're doing is volleyball. So we've gone from 40 to 50 officials overall to 7. And that is a huge decline. But what they have had to do, and what I've challenged my intramural people to do, and also my sport club people to do, is you always say you never have time to focus on your people. This is your time to focus on your people, because those 7 officials, they're going to have to be your supervisors when we get back to full power, because we don't have anybody else. And then your sport club officers that you say you don't get enough time to spend with, well, guess what? Because you're not doing travel paperwork, you got plenty of time to spend with them now. So work on developing your students, because now you don't have the programming, but you still have the students in place, as all the teams are trying to stay around and stay active. So it's been a matter of trying to change their focus from all of the scheduling that they usually do to focusing on something different to keep them motivated. But at the end of the day, they are the ones that are struggling the hardest in the department with, what do I do next? Because they're just waiting to see what's going to be possible.
Jared, what's been your organizational support with training and developing students who are not actively working? That's something that with our trip leaders right now, we're struggling. We're in a budget cut, obviously, with a COVID year, and you know, not enough students coming back. So we are not being supported in continuing their training until they have something to train for. How's that going at LSU?
So we've been fortunate. Our assistant director for student development, some of the stuff that we usually do, such as our kickoff event for the start of the year, was canceled because that's something we usually do in person, that we usually offer breakfast at. So that was a savings of money that we usually don't have. So it's allowed us to do some of those things that you're saying from a training standpoint, because we've been able to save that money in some other areas. So, you know, they are encouraged to continue looking at things. I know for Adventure, they're looking at bringing in someone to do wilderness first aid training here on campus instead of us having to send people away. And that's something that we usually don't do because it is an expensive undertaking to bring that person in to do that. But with the savings that we got from not doing kickoff, and the fact that we're not doing kickoff in the spring either, we've been able to do a couple of those things.
I know here at KU, our sport clubs have been trying for years we hear from our executive boards that they want to have more community amongst each other. And so with COVID, since they're not traveling, we're trying to engage more of them into that community of being a sport club program instead of just the soccer club and the volleyball club, and which they're used to doing, and they're so busy during the school year and traveling. So doing like virtual events like scavenger hunts or trivia nights or something like related to KU trivia night or something informational, so that they can maybe meet more people, and not just their teammates and their officers, but other people as well. With intramurals, obviously, you know, sometimes all of us, not just intramurals, get into this is what we always do, or this is how we do something, and really thinking outside the box and engaging some people who may not already be coming into our facilities, or maybe not doing intramurals on a regular basis. Obviously, you know, we bought a Pop-A-Shot, which we were able to then engage people who maybe weren't even coming in for intramurals, but they did a round of Pop-A-Shot or whatever before they went and lifted or whatever. And so then they did a bracket at the end, at the top, so many people, and the winner then was in a bracket type form. So just trying to keep them engaged, as well as trying to keep them thinking about when this is over, we might, you know, and go back to team sports, you still will have those new people that possibly tried something that was unconditional or unnormal. And so they were able then to come back and be part of intramurals later. Since we kind of have been seeing a decline in intramurals already, our participation numbers have been decreasing. So this might help increase possibly if we get back to the point where we have team sports. So.
Hey, I was going to mention too, also with the sport program staff, we've actually seen an uptick in our individual sports getting things. Like, we tried billiards before and it never happened, and then we get 27 people to show up for it. So that was kind of surprising. But the other thing is, one thing we've done this semester is, if there's a possibility where your areas don't have as much of their normal programming, what special events could they do? So for example, we ended up having a drive-in movie series where we are partnered with student government and Campus Life and hosted at our field complex. And so sport programs was completely in charge of doing that. And that was something that gave them more opportunities to be involved in some different things. And it gave them a chance to meet some people on campus. So I was kind of happy about that. And that's something over the last month that they've been able to really focus on, as we've been the ones kind of responsible for all of the parking and setup and back behind the scenes stuff, while student government and Campus Life was kind of taking care of just the movies and advertising and stuff. So if there is something that, you know, you can do outside the norm, that's something also that we've been able to use to keep them motivated a little bit. And additionally, you know, with the cleaning of the building, we've taken our intramural staff, and they actually come in 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon to assist the custodial staff with some of the cleaning, because we didn't have hours for them to officiate. And so it's been an opportunity to keep them more involved and also help the building staff out with some of the cleaning around the building. So we got about 20 hours a week that we can split between those students to keep them involved in the program as well.
So I want to ask a question about kind of motivation and morale, to kind of, you know, we are very lucky that we have not had to face furloughs at this point on our campus, but we have some vacancies, some folks that had left, you know, right before COVID, and we are not going to fill those positions probably until fiscal year 21. So to help, we've repurposed some time from some people. And I'm kind of curious if other staff members or you've had to do that with some of your staff members, and how have you kept them encouraged and motivated to do those new job duties, to embrace them instead of just go through the motions, and kind of see that as, you know, something that I view it as like, this is great for your long-term development. Look at this new experience you're getting. And that isn't always how they feel. I'm curious if anyone else has been down that road.
Yeah, we have not had the rec sports position for a year and a half now, and then we just recently lost our fitness assistant director. And we're fortunate enough to be able to hire for rec sports this year, this semester. So that is really lucky. But our fitness position, we are likely not going to hire for that person until an assessment of FY 21. And even then it might be postponed. So whenever the task came about of who's going to take on what, typically it falls to the associate director to fill those roles. But our fitness area encompasses our facility cleaning, attendance. And so that has been difficult for our associate director to take on, as well as maintaining our facility during these, really tough times of having to do lots of disinfection and such. So our outdoor adventure assistant director actually took on those 50 staff that man our building. And so, I think our motivator for him was, you don't have a trips program. You might not have a trips program in the near future. How do we keep you on staff? So taking on that extra responsibility is good for you. It's good for our department. It preserves your position, because at a moment in time we were considering layoffs. And so being able to advance his experiences and spread out was super critical. And now we're even considering changing that up a little bit, that our facilities person takes on our Group X program for the same reason that, we could reduce our staff down to 4 people. And we don't want that. We want to be able to spread out that love and expand those experiences, like you were saying, Becky.
Yep, we've had something that's very similar to that. We actually had a few people that decided that they did not want to work during this pandemic. And what that did was it did create a shortage for us as far as professional staff. But what it has allowed some of our student workers actually to step up in kind of an interim role. Our graduate assistants that we actually kept them here and kept them employed, and it's probably going to lead into them getting jobs later on, because we now have an intramural graduate assistant who's been part of our code of mitigation and part of our facility staff training, and it's been to him, it's been actually a positive. And the other end of this is that, we talk about motivation. Our intramural staff is that, because we are not playing intramurals per se, we're doing some individual activities. The only team sport we're going to be playing will be softball, but we're going to try to do that in spring. But when this all came down, our conversation with our intramural staff was, you're going to be absorbed in the maintenance and the facility staff. And they were all on board, because one of the things I was going to ask, as Jared kind of had mentioned too, is that what this has done is it's allowed us to move others into different areas so everybody gets cross-trained. And I think for a lot of students, that when they've got that work in many other areas, that's where they get those relatable exercises with, whether they're in maintenance, whether they're intramural, they're an official, they still deal with budgets in some form or fashion. And we're still giving them those type of characteristic traits that employers want. And they seem to be excited about that, because it is new to them. But then in the same frame, it is fitting a need that we have, because we are shorthanded, we are short-staffed. The other motivation, I think the biggest thing, is that all of our staffs, we've told them that the mitigation that we do every day throughout the day is the one item that they can hang their hat on that allows people to use our facility and feel safe, especially when they see us out there with squirt bottles and rags and using solutions to help clean. Our building's operating at about 33% normal capacity from last year to this year, which will be a question I'll ask later. But and we've been checking numbers, and I mean, it is pretty much by day and by month and by week, we've got about 33% of what we had from last year. And that's still for us a pretty good sizable number. And it keeps everyone involved because we don't have programs that we're not doing. And so we've absorbed those into other areas, kind of as Jared and some of you have talked about. So I think the motivation factor that we've had is not only being a big part of people's everyday wellness and fitness needs, but also on the working side, they've been able to do things that they probably wouldn't have been able to do without COVID. And it's given them a greater sense of responsibility and role that should hopefully lend itself into future endeavors.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Gary said, I totally agree. And that's what we've told our folks that have kind of taken on different roles throughout this time is if they're wanting to advance their career in campus rec, they're all assistant directors right now. Well, where are they going to go next? They're going to be at our level of that associate director role. And when you get to that, you might be overseeing areas that you weren't directly doing, so to speak, as an assistant director or a coordinator. So it's just expanding their knowledge to better prepare them when they are ready for that, next step. I know when I was, coming up, I always tried to volunteer to do different things in different areas just to make myself well-rounded. So I was ready for an associate position and eventually, hopefully, a director position at some point. So I had a good working knowledge of all facets of campus rec. And that's what we're trying to communicate to our folks here is this is going to help you down the road if you want to further your career and advance up in the future.
Some areas outside of our department that we have asked our staff to help out with, including myself, actually. We do calls through the health center for the COVID-19 tracing, as well as some of our staff assist with quarantine and isolation food delivery. So just being those really good campus partners to other people on campus is really important for our staff.
Well, and Becky, I created this issue with our staff in that, number one, I forgot to mention that I'm also the assistant director of outdoor programs, because it's been vacant for a year. In addition, which you just take on, right, as an associate if somebody reports to you, and then find out we're on a hiring freeze. But then I also announced yesterday at Texas, announced that I will be retiring in December. And during a COVID pandemic hiring freeze, they are not filling that position either. And so a lot of discussion about a reorganization, but the initial impact was, this is so much more work. But we have a lot of capacity right now, I feel like, in our staff, because they have been doing other things outside of the department. And so it's kind of a refocus because they have been here so long and are so good at their jobs that it leaves time to work with another department on DEI or be a consultant for this or officiate or do something else. And so some of that has to be reined in. But then the discussion was, because we reorganized a little bit, there are different reporting lines. And so it gives you an opportunity to meet new students that would not have reported to you before, because we don't really have graduate assistants or anything, but we're trying to petition for that. But then also it gives you an opportunity to report to a new manager. And so learning managing up with a different personality that you haven't worked with for a while as well. And it gives them, yes, as Justin was saying, if you want to advance in the field, it gives you experience in managing up and managing down outside of your comfort zone, because we switched everything around. So it'll be interesting. Yes, it's more work, but we also, again, rely heavily on student managers, and those students are hungry to be able to get that leadership experience as well.
Let's pivot into some of the commentary and the topics about student engagement and staff development. I'm not sure if the topic that was posted for staff development was full-time staff or student staff development programming, but I think we all are feeling that strain. Our positions feel the strain a little bit more because we don't typically deal with students on a day-to-day basis. COVID has kind of increase that gap, if you will, because most of us, well, maybe not most of us, but a lot of us aren't in the office right now. So we're not seeing them every day and talking with them and passing them in the hallways and kind of getting that. So I'm not sure who posted that, if they want to unmute or put in the chat kind of a little more pointed of their conversation or question that they'd like to hear from others about.
My part that I posted was more about the professional full-time staff. So like if there's no ability for advancement or they can't supervise a full-time staff or something of that nature, like how do you continue to get them to grow or professionally think about growing? What are the things you're doing? Obviously I've tried different things, but if that continues to stay the same, like how do you continue to get them to think about professional growth opportunities when maybe there's not hands-on opportunities available?
It certainly is challenging, I think, when you can't point to a position and say, in a few years, there might be an opportunity for growth at this campus, or you're not in a position to reshuffle the deck like they're going to do at TCU when Mary Ellen retires. We have certainly had this own challenge in our own department, and we've tried a couple of, we were trying last year to develop some intentional kind of structure and road mapping using the NASPA and ACPA white paper with competencies. And there was some lessons learned in our approach that will help us kind of go back and start over when we have more personnel that's able to dedicate some time to that. And that's not always the answer, because it's not always what our staff members want to hear, but it is what they need to do. So has anyone else had any luck trying any other strategies with their full-time staff?
Our division offers a lot of professional development opportunities. I mean, well, of course, leading up to this year, they are all going to offer some Zoom opportunities, but it's interesting to think that our department could offer those, as we offer a lot of within our assistant directors. They offer things like read a book and then we'll talk about it, for theoretical concepts like Simon Sinek's Start With Why, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. We do a lot of that for our student staff, but we don't offer that for our professional staff because they're the ones who are typically teaching that stuff. And I tried to do that I first started it in March to bring that to the team. And then we all kind of went our own way because we all went home. But I know that it has been more welcoming to get that from an outside entity. And so we were actually looking to bring that, our conflict resolution team in to talk about what to do when we have issues with our coworkers, because sometimes we all know each other for so long that it's just, well, this is what Becky does. This is how Christy is. And so that eventually starts to get on the nerves of a team that works for 5-6 years altogether. So we were planning on bringing an outside entity to talk about those things. And everyone seemed far more receptive of that rather than hearing it from me or Ashley, because I think that sometimes it could seem pointed or, just overly aggressive coming from somebody internally that you've worked with for several years. So that was something we were going to try to do, is bring our resources around campus that do this for organizations all over the world, or even just, the state. So that was an idea that we had, Jill, if that helps at all.
I mean, if I can jump in here a little bit with kind of hitchhiking what Lauren said, I think also it's important to continue to do that, whether or not, I think a lot of us got into a point when March 20th hit or April 1st or whenever that happened, we just stopped and blame everything on COVID and whatever it is. There's a lot that's happened since March. And so you have all the you have social justice issues, you have racial equity issues, and those are still things, And then you have the Trump administration order with cease and desist, training of stereotype training. So there's still things to do and there's still work to do. And I still think there's resources at each of our universities that we can tap in, because we need to remember those people have jobs and those people need to do their jobs. And so we can still provide, they can still provide us with trainings that we can help facilitate, how to work with our staff. Like, it is different working with staff that are remote. And then you have people who are, you have families with kids, people who, single parents, people without kids, all working in the same world. So I think there's some kind of negotiating there to come to a happy place with that, or a place where we can all be fair with that. But I think it also behooves us to kind of look into our university resources, especially as we're winding down for this semester, and say, most of us will be out by December 1st. And say, starting January 2021, this is what we're going to do. COVID will still be around, and we'll still have the sports suspensions and the activity stuff, but we need to do things also for our students, and we can also double down and do those same things for our staff.
Thanks, James. You brought up a good point in there that you were talking about, especially with trainings and that of what are we looking like after Thanksgiving, whether in the chat or you want to throw up your hand or you want to jump in. What does your campus look like after Thanksgiving? Because I think he hit it on the nail on the head. What are you like? That's a whole, some of y'all are, nothing is open. So what does that look like? Or some of y'all still status quo, like keep programming. So if you want to drop it in the chat or jump in and say, if you've got something really unique going on, crazy, you just want to say, this is what we're doing, we'd love to hear it.
Most state are sorry, go ahead, Gary. I'll go. Okay. Most state, our president announced a couple of weeks ago that there are no plans to discontinue on-campus life after Thanksgiving. So that was really cool to hear that our president has faith in our campus to continue business as usual. But we are always, flu season's coming around. COVID could increase due to those symptoms as well. And so we're all kind of on board with staying on campus and remaining open, but it's something that our president is wanting us to stay in business, to keep our jobs, keep our students happy, and continue doing life as normal as best we can.
Yeah, I think like most of the people that are putting into the chat is that we are going to remain open, even though the university is going to be all online, but we've actually been asked by departments to have things to do. So we've actually purchased additional resources as far as like tailgate games. And one of the things that we are doing is that we're working with the esports clubs to do not only intramural, but all types of programming, whether it be Rocket League, Madden, some of the video games. So we are actually building a calendar post Thanksgiving up until the week of finals that we're still going to be trying to do things with everyone. Because we initially had stopped all of our programming at Thanksgiving. And so the directors and people got together and said, there are still going to be people on staff who can't go home. And so we have a lot of our members, especially the international community, that they are going to be on campus during the entire break. So we're actually doing things to try to reach out to anyone and everyone who's even in Norman that's a student, to try to get them engaged in activities that they want to do. Obviously, most of it will not have the in-person deal unless they're on campus. And at that point, we're still trying to do things where we're social distance, mask, and doing all that mitigation thing. So we don't know, I think it was Chris, we still don't know what our hours are going to be yet, because since we are operated by a lot of our student staff, we will know by November 1st whose staff has got enough to have the building open and what those hours will be. So we're supposed to let our vice president know that about the 1st.
Yeah, I think we're all, whether you're open or not open or online and need to be open, I think all of us are trying to figure out who's going to still be around to want to work at the same time. I know we've had discussions of And other groups and other roundtables have been the full-time staff need to jump in and start assisting with certain parts of being open. And so it's nice to see that there's a lot of consistency in we're staying open at University of Arkansas. Students are actually coming back. Classes will still be in person. Only 33% of our classes are in person right now. So it's not a huge number. Gary, I know you asked earlier about like, what are we seeing? And we see anywhere from a 25 to 30% usage as we saw from last year at this time. But it's gonna be a unique kind of time this Thanksgiving to starting spring programming of how everything kind of filters out through our world and with our students and on campuses.
Yeah, I had an interesting discussion with some of our students because when I knew we were going to have to be open and I staffed the climbing wall, and then we also have to staff the facility. And I was talking, we put out a Google Doc to fill up the shifts, and it was full within 15 minutes. And so talking to students, and I'm like, okay, I thought this one might be a little more difficult. And because we're finishing all of our finals and everything the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and our students are like, I have just been home for over 7 months with my family. I love them, but I do not want to spend another 7 weeks with my family. And so they're staying. Ours can stay on campus. They just have to let their residence hall know that. And so we probably will be busy up until we close on the 18th of December and then open up again on the 4th. And so they'll still have their 2 weeks, 3 weeks if they don't want to come back till 4 weeks till school starts or whatever. So it's just kind of an interesting dynamic. In a normal year, we would be scrambling to try to fill like that January time, and they're all like, nope, I'll be back. Don't worry about it. I don't want to spend that much time at home. And my parents don't necessarily.
Mary Ellen, so if you want to send them up the road, we'll
yeah.
after the break.
I'll come up there and work. How about that?
Lifeguards, this is where we're struggling. So anybody got any lifeguards they want to hang their hat on? We're open.
Yeah.
I always find it fascinating who's doing what programming based on where you're at. If you're in a metroplex like Dallas, or you're more of a college town, I think it's always super cool to see what you can do. And like we've said before, what our administrations are allowing us to do. So at UTD, we only have maybe 2,500 kids on campus, and that's it. And probably 2/3 of those are international students with nowhere else to go. So our administration has said, if you have somewhere to go in the States, essentially you're not allowed to stay on campus when we close after Thanksgiving. And so that'll leave maybe those international students. So we'll essentially have our smaller facility open. But even right now, we're not doing any events other than what's virtual. And maybe in our main facility, we have maybe 25 people max at any 1 hour of the day. So it's very, very, very slow. But, I think it's just, we've taken the approach with our staff that we know this is such an odd time compared to what we're usually used to, that, those issues that we may have with students not feeling comfortable, or something else with life is just really weird, or they're anxious, or they need some resources. It's, we're just going to deal with it. We let it happen. We're there to provide resources and fill in physically when needed. But really, like, our whole mantra is we're not going to push the envelope, and we're not going to be as stringent as we had been in those policies. Because, the life balance really at this point is way more important for us to survive the long term than grind to the stone right now and keep our policies black and white. So interesting balance.
I know we're starting to get toward the end. Is there anything that got dropped in the chat that was submitted earlier that you want to make sure we get to while we're here? Because we can continue on this topic. I know between COVID and staffing, we could go all day, but is there anything we want to make sure everybody gets their questions they really want it answered out there and asked? Anything floating out there?
I'll ask Mary. I've got 6 more years left. How do I make it so I can get to where you're at?
Well, TCU made it a little bit easier because the budget, they offered voluntary incentive retirement. And so that's really what was kind of pushed over the edge. So let me think, if you're going to pay me to not work for at least 6 months, because, well, and I probably was 2, maybe 3 years away. But it just also became kind of one of those, I mean, obviously without that incentive, I probably would still be here, but it was just that time to say, it doesn't mean that I have to leave my friends. It doesn't mean that I have to leave NERSA. It doesn't mean that it's just that I won't be here every single day. So finding something else to do, probably that involves recreation somewhere, but not full time. And so I think you just kind of put your head down and power through and be that kind of shining light, I guess, to your staff as much as you can motivate them. Then it helps to maybe motivate. I don't know. It'll be a weird. It's going to be weird. So I've been here 27 years and been in the field for 37 years. So it's kind of a weird dynamic.
Well, that was my next question, is that, I mean, since you're already shorthanded and now you're leaving, I mean, is your staff fairly nervous about how this is going to function without you? Because I know we're not all irreplaceable. I mean, maybe I don't know. But, as far as, leaving at a time like this, I know for us, because we're not a very big staff, with us being 2 down already, if somebody else was to leave, it would make it very difficult for those who remain.
I think that like I mentioned, I think there's capacity here only because, so what we were talking about, kind of motivating staff, that's why I have staff that are teaching, and that's why I have staff that are doing DEI, and that's why I have staff that are on this university committee and that university committee and teaching for HR and doing other things, because that was a way to broaden horizons. But now I think some of that's just going to have to be reined in because it's kind of exploded, because the day-to-day became so routine. And it's like, well, let's focus back now because it's not going to be routine anymore. And so, but I talked to a couple of people that are, one that's taken on outdoor programs yesterday, and it's a passion of hers. It's just, and she's like, I'm excited about the opportunity. I'm just scared about the workload. And so kind of reassuring that during COVID, we're doing trips, but people have to get there. None of them are more than 30 minutes away. They're really low key, they're daily trips, things like that. So this is a good kind of get your feet wet kind of year in some of these areas because of the pared down programming, like sport clubs. Throwing sport clubs at somebody who's already got another programming area in a normal year would be crazy. But because clubs are restricted, you can get to know them, you can get to know their personalities and what their needs are and things like that before the program kind of expands again. So this is actually a good time, I think, more so than in a normal year, having somebody leave like that. Either way, I'm out the door.
I'm hoping they give me that incentivized retirement. That's what I'm hoping for, because I've had a few guys that I've known that's here at OU that's worked, and they got that and they were out the door without even asking a question.
Well, and Gary, to answer your question, will they, how are they going to exist without me? They're already deciding who's going to be in my office. So I don't, body's not cold yet. So I said, I'm not moving. No, nobody gets in here until after December. People in measuring for curtains, that kind of thing.
You left them a legacy, right?
One last thing that Kristen and I wanted to kind of cover or circle back to is we had sent out a survey in early 2020 for associate directors to kind of gauge some of your areas that you needed more support in, what you wanted an associate director community to look like. And while we weren't able to do that presentation at the annual conference. And a lot of our needs have changed in the last 7 months. We still are pursuing kind of what that looks like to bring that to the board of directors at NERSA to say, like, can we formalize this a little bit more for this level of staff? And if you could indulge in one last part of the mentee survey to kind of share with us like what you feel our needs are as associate directors. And it's for Kristen and I, this is just an opportunity to see kind of what has changed from last year to this year. That would be very helpful for us. As you all are typing, I'll kind of give you a little preview. When we sent out the survey last year, we sent it to kind of people we knew that were associate directors, asked them to share it, but we also posted it on NERSA Connect community, and it went out, and we had about 100 associate directors participate in the survey, which we were kind of expecting maybe 30 or 40. So 100 responses.
We were very pleasantly surprised. Thank you so much.
Was far exceeded what we were hoping for. We got a lot of feedback that was really, really helpful, but I guess we're kind of, knowing how much has changed in our day-to-day operating lives, have our needs really changed? And I think the answer will be no, but I think how we go about meeting those needs, we might all be a little more open and flexible to what kind of services or programs come about as a result of that. So feel free to hit up Kristen or I outside of this roundtable to talk about that any further. I was putting all the information together in March and actually decided to pivot to write a white paper, and that has totally fallen off. So it's my goal to finish that before the end of this year. But if you have things that you want to talk about that you think, we know that we need a community to connect. We feel like the forgotten person, and we need some intentional development in this area. So if you have ideas about that or strong feelings, just reach out and let us know. Well, thanks everyone so much. It's 9:58. Thank you for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Bye, everybody.